If you've got someone who's an elite seller, they're doing all the homework. They've briefed everybody fully on what their role is, what the expectations are. They've already foreseen the outcome. They know the challenges that are going to happen. That's an elite seller, someone that can really be that perceptive, get ahead of the game, do the preparation.
We are back with another episode of the Elite Selling Podcast. It is your hosts, Frankie and Griffin. Today we've got a great guest in Dean Hickman Smith. Dean is the Chief Revenue Officer at HackerOne. Prior to HackerOne, Dean has held leadership positions like SVP of Worldwide Sales and CRO at companies like Proofpoint, BitGlass, and Arrowhive. Today we're talking to Dean about the importance of building your trust network and getting out. And Dean's going to give us some great recommendations and some action items and what's really worked for him in the past. Exciting conversation. Before we jump in, if you are liking the podcast, if you're listening here, do us a favor, shoot us a little, thumbs up, little 5-star on Spotify, whatever you're listening on. It'd mean the world to me and Frankie, just to continue to support the podcast so we can keep bringing great guests on like Dean. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Here's Dean. Dean, welcome to the Elite Selling Podcast this Friday. How are you doing?
I am really well, thanks, and exciting to be here on such a prestigious platform. Really happy Friday to you both.
You're talking us up. It can only go down from here.
Anything that calls itself elite selling has already.
You're going to teach us the ways. We don't know
already.
yet.
Yeah,
exactly.
No, anyway,
all right,
it's
so
great
Dean,
to hang out with you.
before we jump in, are you getting in a plane this weekend?
Yes, I am getting in a plane this weekend. Hopefully, I am getting in a relatively new to me plane that I'm learning to fly at the moment, which it's called an MX, and I shall be probably traumatizing the guy that's training me in that plane on Sunday.
I love it. Well, the next piece of content that we're going to put out is me filming in the back of your plane, doing a couple barrel rolls. So expect that from the Elite Selling Podcast page.
I thought about that actually. I haven't done. I tried to do an interview with someone, but my technical skills weren't up to it. I put someone in the back and basically just got them, like pulling G. So got some good camera shots, but not much dialogue. But I think we should try it. It could be quite fun.
Thanks for some good content on LinkedIn.
Oh yeah, I did tell my dad who's a pilot. I told my dad who's a pilot, and he's like, "Dude, you don't know what you're getting yourself into." So it should be fun. That could be a good time.
Gentle
Dean, we appreciate you jumping on. This is, again, we appreciate you taking time. I know when we talked and we were prepping for the podcast, usually we like to anchor on a specific topic, and we were brainstorming. And one of the things that came up was building trust, right? Continuous, elite sellers build trust. And one of the things you mentioned was that Frankie and I loved was elite sellers build their trust network. So before we jump in, I'd love for you to just kind of break down what you mean by trust network, how you define a trust network, and why you feel like trust, especially going into 2025, is so important in today's selling landscape. And then we just go from there.
Yeah, I think trust is kind of implicit in everything we do, right? If we're going to be effective salespeople, we have to have effective relationships with people, and they have to lean into that relationship. They have to feel comfortable. They have to feel that you're authentic in the conversation. And how do you get that? I mean, it's really hard when we're all sitting here, on our backsides, sitting on Zoom all day. How do you get out and build those relationships? And some of us have been around for a long time and are lucky enough to have what I refer to as a trust network. So if I want to get into a new market, or I want to launch a new product, or I just want to generate new sales in a certain area, then I've always got a trusted network that I can call upon for advice and direction, contacts to get going. So that's what I refer to as a trust network.
Is a trust network like people you can call that you could go sell to? Is it people that can give you advice? Is it people that are in the industry you're working on? Like, what does that actually look like? Those types of people?
trust network is everything, right?
Everything.
If you want to, you want to fly a new plane, right? You don't get into a plane that hasn't been maintained by somebody that you trust. If you want to take a new product to market, you probably want to tap into like in Japan, for example. Then I'm fortunate. I've been doing business there for 20 years. So, I've got a network that I can take something new, make a few phone calls and get into that. But it goes beyond that. I had a person call me this morning to say, okay, I'm looking for a new role. These are the three options. How would I analyze which is the best role for me? Who are the best investors? It can go every which way. And if you're new to the industry, it's really how do you quickly build that network so that you can be as effective as possible in any of those aspects. It could be career, it could be choosing a new job, it could be a work-related thing, or it could be anything socially too, like buying a house or getting advice on any aspect of life.
Yeah, I remember when I started my career 11, 12 years ago, it was like a training program for 2 years where you had to go to the office so that you could, I think a big part of it was build that trust network. And probably 20% of the time was they would put you in front of people to go network and learn. And those are some relationships I still have today. But you brought up a good point, Dean. I was sitting eating lunch today outside, like getting frustrated. I'm like, I'm so sick of being inside in front of a screen all day. Like, that's not why I signed up for sales. I got to figure out a way to go meet people, shake their hand, get face to face, because I think that's where those connections happen. So maybe somebody that's been in their career for only a few years or post COVID or mainly this virtual world, like how are some ways that people can build that network outside of the screen or optimize what they're doing? Do you have any advice there?
I could talk for a long time on that, actually. I've
That's
had
why we brought you on.
some
Let's
interesting
go.
experiences. Recently I joined a company called HackerOne, and I joined right after COVID and started just calling up my sales team to see who they were and what made them tick. And when I diagnosed the successful ones and the less successful ones, I started digging in on the less successful ones to see, what had held them back. And we'd hired during COVID. We had people in locations that didn't really know many people in their location. So the first thing I started doing was just hosting fairly informal events, like coffee get-togethers, dinners, things where we could invite people to mingle. And some of my team were really surprised about the social aspect of selling, like getting out, going to. There are a lot of networking events out there. There's all sorts of data connectors and infosec groups that you can join, and they weren't taking advantage of those. They're very inexpensive, but they're great if you want to go and meet people and just start building your trust network from scratch. Those are a great place to start. An even easier place to start, though, is if you join a company, find out who's handling existing customers. If you're a new business seller, find out who's handling the existing customers in your territory and get an introduction to those customers. In our world, very little these days is bought without there being some sort of referral check, right? So when I looked at doing this podcast, the first thing I did was jump on your LinkedIn profile and see who you were, where you were, not not being kind of weird about it or anything, but just trying to figure out your background and did I want to be associated with that? Now, apart from some weird stuff that Frankie had posted on Facebook, there's not that much strange content out there about
Thought
you
I
guys.
deleted that. Dang it.
I thought
Those
I
Florida
felt
State boys,
reasonably comfortable.
Oh,
But no, seriously, right? What you put out is what you get back. So since LinkedIn, I don't know about you, but I am fastidious about one thing, and that is making sure I link into everybody that I meet. And then I try to go 2 or 3 contacts beyond that person. And when you're connected with somebody, their network starts to work for you. I then put out content on LinkedIn. Hopefully we'll put this podcast out on LinkedIn, but 3 times a week, 4 times a week, I put something out and generally 2,000-3,000 people look at the stuff I put out, and I try and intersperse that with something that's authentic to me, a little bit of flying, or an invitation to an aerobatics event, or something that's just not work. So you build a little bit of a profile, and lo and behold, there's 25,000 people on my LinkedIn connection. 2,000 people look at everything I put out. That's 6,000 a week. 300,000 people a year are looking at stuff that I'm putting out. And I'm not like an influencer or anything, but people know, therefore, who I am and what I do and what I stand for. So you've got to start like that, really. You've got to start the networking at the grassroots level. It's the connections, the events. If you're new to a company, it's meeting existing customers. And if they genuinely start to see you and you've built that, you start to build an authentic bond with a few existing customers, they'll refer you to their networks. And then you've really got to build your own profile and take ownership of that. And the number of times you go to LinkedIn, someone will approach you, then you go to LinkedIn and check them out, and it's some awful profile of them doing something like, some really bad photo pulled off like a high school yearbook or something. It's just terrible quality stuff, and you think, I can't be bothered to talk to that person. So you just got to put the effort in to make your profile, whatever's out there, interesting enough for people to want to get into conversation with you.
Griff used to have a profile picture of himself at his wedding with a nice bow tie on. Remember that one?
Hey man, it got the job done until I got made fun of by our chief operating officer. That like, have you ever seen anybody with their wedding photo? And I'm like, I better go get a new headshot. And I, dropped maybe about $100 on some new headshots.
If that, right? I mean, just even
you don't even need to do that.
I don't know. Yeah, if you're smart, you can do it at an event. Yeah, but no, I think you're absolutely right.
Then,
go ahead.
I don't know. Taking that a little bit further, right? After that? Then you've really got to get into a mentoring network. You've really got to start building that trust network with some people that are connected. I mean, how do we put this in any other way? I was really lucky to meet the person that brought me to America, a guy called Mark Smith, who's still a friend of mine to this day. I think I may have mentioned it before, probably one of the tallest guys, apart from you two, weirdly, on the planet. This is like the tall guys club, apart from the short British.
You'll get there one day.
Yeah.
no matter what I take, I'm not catching up. But yeah, Mark was just fantastic mentor, and he knew so many people, and he was so generous with his introductions. Through him, and then a whole cast of other characters that I just developed long bond personal relationships with, you just start to get introduced to all of their networks. And if you are authentic and you're genuinely interested in people and networking, that's what makes your career, really. I mean, you thrive off that, and then you suddenly start meeting the investment community, and that world opens up lots and lots of new doors too. So you've got to be authentic, you've got to put the content out, you've got to make those connections. You've got to network fastidiously on LinkedIn, and then make some true mentor type relationships happen. And then the rest is up to you to do the heavy lifting and be very genuine with customers and treat them well, and your reputation starts to build. This sounds so obvious. I can't believe I'm saying it. You should have hit the boring buzzer back then. But
no, I think you're spot on. I think that what we're not saying, though, especially when it comes to LinkedIn, what we're not saying, if I'm hearing you correctly, is to reach out to customers and introduce yourself and say, I want to meet time with you, or I want to grab time with you so I can pitch you my product. Someone that you've never met before, right? That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is connecting with people with a genuine and a heartfelt way of, I just want to connect with you to learn more about maybe your role, or I have something interesting I thought we could discuss. We don't want is the message to go out that, hey, I just got hit with what we call a pitch slap, right? Immediate DM on LinkedIn, somebody trying to pitch me something that has nothing to do with my my role, my company, what I do has nothing to do with that. So I think that's the big mistake when it comes to LinkedIn. But if you're genuine and you want to make connections, I think that's an incredible place to start.
I
I
think
just
there's got to
listed off
be
one of the
like an
mistakes. Yeah, go ahead.
I think there's an inverse correlation. If you do that, right, you make
Yeah,
you make the connection and then you completely spoil it by doing the immediate follow up. It's
Yeah.
got to be a genuine connection. A nice message too helps. It just
yeah,
the sort of a realistic message that I like. I really would like to connect, but just let's stay in touch. Perfect. The person accepts. Then then you're in their feed. So the content you put out is then going to be what really starts to build that initial level of credibility. Ideal if it's validated by third parties. When I start to see something where one of my other friends, someone that I trust, has commented on that third party's content, then I start to feel like there's a bond, like I know them. And then ideally, then of course you're going to meet at some sort of real life event too. I didn't go into that, but a lot of the people that are relatively like in year 2 or 3 of their career haven't done that many live events. I spoke to somebody who'd never sat down and had dinner with a customer. Back in the old days, we used to say never dine alone, right? We were on the road all the time, and then we'd always take a customer or a partner to a dinner as well. Never waste that opportunity to sort of sit down and form that level of relationship. Um, and yeah, and one of my reps asked me, "What do you talk about over dinner?" Is they,
Oh my gosh, no.
so, what do you talk about? I don't know. In any other scenario, when you meet somebody new, what do you talk about?
Yeah.
It's got to be authentic. It's got to be just genuine. Otherwise, it's going to be a very stilted conversation apart from anything else. But just ask them about themselves. How do they get
yeah,
to where they have? There you go. Anyway,
Well,
so
it's just playing the long game too, right? You know?
yeah.
I cut you off, sorry. Go ahead.
no, no, you didn't cut me off. I was pontificating, so you should have cut me off, which is
All
great.
right. We're gonna keep moving then, Dean, all right?
Yeah,
Um, no, it's just playing the long game, right? And it's everyone's trying to like every message has to move the needle and get the next stage in the sale or whatever. And what you're talking about is you built up this career of building solid relationships where if you need to get into a new market or sell a new product or have this idea for your business, like you can go and call up those people and they can give you that advice. And I think we miss that mark, like people that have been selling even Griff and I 11, 12 years or less, where it's just like the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, versus just having that connection to have the connection. How do you balance that though? Like if as you're talking, like if I want to sell to Dean, and I know you're a key buyer for me potentially. I message you on LinkedIn. Like, what does that need to look like for you as an executive who's super busy, who has your own sales team, your own priorities, and then a random Frankie Vignon comes in and messages you? Like, what's the worst way to do it, and then the best way to do that? If you can quickly walk through that.
yeah. I think we touched on the worst way, which is
The
like
worst way, we've touched on the worst way. Let's talk about the better way.
hit me up on LinkedIn and then go straight into a pitch is definitely not the way. But I think making the connection with a genuine outreach that says something along the lines of, yeah, I think I genuinely have something interesting to talk about. Let's try and arrange. Certainly, I am interested in content. When I see
Hmm.
something that is right in my wheelhouse, that's really interesting to me, I don't want it served up as a cold outreach. I would prefer, as I said, to see it in your feed. And ideally, you've got reference customers that are people that I do know and do trust and part of my own reference framework. So Frankie saying, "Hey, Chris Lynch recommended, or Tim Eads recommended that I give you a call." Somebody that's one of my trusted advisors out there, or a Mark Smith or a Mark Weatherford, or it's pretty easy to, the cool thing about LinkedIn is seeing who you know that they know,
Hmm.
and then networking off that peer reference is for me the one thing. I will nearly always respond to someone that establishes credibility by referencing a third party that I do know and I do trust. And
Or
you
someone on your
who I
team.
trust, or
Yeah,
someone on
like,
my team. Yeah, actually
hey,
coming at me
I've done my
through.
homework. I've talked to certain folks that are connected that I know are in your sphere of influence. I'm not just coming to the table with a pitch slap hoping that you might grab time. It's I've established credibility. I've done my homework. I've talked to your team, and I would love to grab time with you to share my findings if you feel like that's interesting. I think
Yeah,
that to
I,
me is you have to come with that level of approach if you want to establish a connection there. I think that's crucial as well.
I look at that as the next step as well. So the
Yeah,
value hypothesis is the next step of the credible conversation. Right. So
yeah,
the first stage is referring from person A to person B. That's good. If you can do that in the real world, it's even easier. You
yeah.
meet at a trade show. I meet hundreds, if not thousands, of people at trade shows. So few actually make a connection afterwards. That's like the mark of a much better seller is if you just on the back of, I used to do this at trade shows when I was, on the booth. I just write a note on the back of every because you meet hundreds of people
Oh
over
yeah,
2 days.
Yeah.
Something personal from that conversation, just as an aid memoir. That was when we did have business cards. Now, of course, we scan people, but it gives you an even better opportunity to drop into the text, like something that is an anchor to that person, and just remember what was said. And that blows people away when you actually come back to them and say, hey, we talked about, I don't know, Gulfstream aviation or something, random. And then you drop that back into the conversation, you're instantly memorable. That's a good way of getting back to people. But the next step is the opening conversation, which is for me the interesting one. I am really big on like having something of real value to talk to people about when I do actually get them on the phone. Most of the time, I've got a CISO or somebody that's getting a barrage of people doing discovery calls, and they don't want to be asked a lot of open-ended questions. And I know that this is probably going to go counter to every selling methodology out there, but if you don't have some value hypothesis already like on the tip of your tongue, it might not be 100% right, but if you haven't done the homework to figure out what is going to be interesting to that person, then you're going to be blown up pretty quickly, and that call's not going to go anywhere in my humble opinion.
yeah,
Agreed. Let's go back to the mentor conversation because a lot of
yeah.
people I don't think know how to properly set up mentor-mentee relationship. Like it's one thing to reach out to Dean and say, I really am interested in your content. It's great. Could we get on a call and talk about it? It's another thing to properly set up scheduled times with expectations and all sorts of different things. So I'm curious if somebody's never had a mentor or haven't really had one in a while, what does that relationship look like from somebody trying to get one?
It takes on many forms, right? I think the best mentor in many ways is quite often the person you report to at work. Certainly for me, it has been. I mean, I got into sales by meeting a random stranger on a train, and he turned into a great mentor to me and really helped me navigate getting into sales and understanding how to frame a selling motion and how to build a career out of it. And then, yeah, I've worked for a bunch of really, really cool people that have all been very generous with their time. So when you're looking for a job, even like that, a great question is in the interview process, what's your approach to mentoring people that join the company? And if that person doesn't have a good answer to that, I would probably correlate them immediately to being a pretty lousy boss. So that might be worth digging into when you're interviewing for a role. But often it's the person who you're reporting to that's going to have the connections you want to get in a relatively short time frame. So, and they're accessible. So
Mm-hmm.
you're just setting up that once a week. If you want to differentiate yourself from everybody else in the virtual sales floor, then just ask for not a review every week, but just a mentoring session. Like, how would you approach these challenges that I'm seeing? If someone who's responsible for you sees you leaning into the investment in your career like that, I would be surprised if they weren't impressed.
Yeah.
So that's one level. Second level is I've actually had some customers that have become great mentors over time, and quite often they were the most heated customers. We launched some products a while ago, a company called NetScreen, and they weren't quite as high performance as the customers had expected them to be. So I was sent out to apologize to customers that were experiencing some throughput issues, to say the least. And we had a guy called Andre Gold at Continental Airlines. I will never forget the meeting with him because he was so angry. When I walked in the door, he was really furious, I mean, I learned a lot from him, and I'm still in touch with the guy today, like, more than a decade later. So you often learn through forging relationships with customers as well, and then just a fantastic win-win relationship. You build trust, you solve their challenges, they will refer you into their network, and you are on your path to being able to scale and grow your career.
I
I
love
kind
those
of rambled on
recommendations.
there,
No,
Frankie.
I love it.
No, it's,
Where was that question going? I forget. Sorry.
no, it's perfect. I think to summarize, it's bring something of value, have a curiosity, and follow up, and like be willing to lean in and have that coachability and not shy away from it.
Yeah, don't be
And
afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to
yeah,
ask.
and I completely agree. I think my most challenging prospects and customers that put up the biggest fight up front oftentimes either become your biggest champions in deals or your best mentors because they're the ones that are passionate about getting it right. So lean into that conversation, bring value, and bring the right resources like you did.
But I
Yeah,
think just
couldn't
on
agree
just
more. I
really
mean,
quick, the thing I wanted to touch on, Dean, that I thought was really interesting that you brought up around your customers is that yes, you reached out to make a connection to them, and they were willing to give you feedback, direct feedback, and that connection because you were willing to listen and they were heard. That I guarantee you established that initial trust connection. And I think that a common mistake that happens in sales today is that sellers wait until a deal is in flight or in the pipeline now I'm going to try and build trust when there's a deal on the plate because I'm going to try and do something at the end of this. I've always heard, and I think maybe this is back to a leader that Frankie and I work for, champions, like the best champions building happens when there's no deal involved. Like when you're just reaching out to establish a connection and get some advice or get some direction, or you want to show up for a customer when there is no deal on the table. That I think really has worked for me, and I know it's worked for guys like Frankie in the past as well.
100%. You've got to show up honestly and with real integrity when there isn't a deal on the table. That's the mark of someone they can trust. And I was going to go with, it's that authenticity, I think, actually, that
Yeah.
you've got to bring to the table the whole time, right? You've got to be the real you. I see so many salespeople that follow a kind of like a script, a stilted script, and it's so detectable in the way they communicate. I don't really script anything. I'll go on stage in front of 10,000 people and I don't script it. I know what I want to get out of it, and I'll definitely have points that I want to hit at times that I want to hit them. But maybe 10,000 people is a bit more than I actually normally go on stage for. But in front of
20,000.
That's crowd, man.
Come on.
in front of a couple, when I am supporting Ricky Gervais, I like to play a decent audience. But the normal audience, they don't want to hear a script, right? They want to hear the
Yeah.
real you. They want to hear the authentic you. I don't know if you've ever seen John. Do you ever see John Chambers, the old Cisco CEO,
Yeah.
speak?
I used to work at Cisco, yeah.
One of the most compelling speakers. And a lot of his time he would spend in the audience talking back to the stage as if he's part of the audience, just to sort of connect with people. And he'd reach out
Yeah.
and he would touch people in the audience in an appropriate manner. And he was just brilliant on stage and interesting to listen to, authentic, very Southern in his kind of like way of doing things. And I'm from the south of England. Maybe that's why we made a connection. But
Both Southern boys, you know what I mean?
we know how
There
to
you go.
we know how to connect with the audience. Yeah.
That's good.
No, it's like that in life, right? If I don't know, I've seen people do very stilted presentations, very stilted outreach, lots of programmatic stuff. People filter that out really, really quickly, and that is,
Yeah.
I don't know. AI gives you the ability to do a lot of research and make it
Yeah.
really, really tangible, concise research. So you have no excuse now to not come in with a value proposition, because you could just run an AI prompt to get a value proposition that gives you enough intelligence to go and talk to pretty much anybody with a really, really well thought out plan. But still, people don't do it. So
Yeah.
shame on them. But some things to think about there.
I'm curious your take, because what you're talking about is getting me thinking a lot about, you mentioned AI, but we've talked a little bit about like sales processes here as well, where there's potentially this over rotation of coming in with this perfect script, perfect discovery calls, perfect, I'm going to knock off this letter on MedPick, I'm going to get this next step. And I think it's so critical to do that. But at the same time, we over rotate, and then we might not actually think about, oh, can I actually help this person, whether it's on a sales call or an interaction at a conference or just bumping to somebody in a coffee shop. I'm curious your take as somebody that leads a large sales team, has to drive revenue, but also is obviously very passionate about being authentic and being yourself and doing the right thing. Like how do you balance that of like having a sales process, but also being yourself and being genuine? Does that question make sense?
It makes a lot of sense to me. I just try and look, I have three daughters, and I have a wife that keeps me very, very like grounded. So if I ever get carried away with myself, my family brings me straight to earth, which is great. And I have to truly believe in what I'm doing. I mean, I couldn't sit in front of a product or a company that I didn't truly get excited about. And I'm lucky at HackerOne. I am every day. I wake up really excited about what we're doing and where we're going and the challenges that we're solving. And every day is a very interesting conversation, which is really helpful. But I jump on a lot of calls with a lot of my team, and my team may think that I probably joke around maybe too much, because they're very dedicated people. They have their plans. They have their, we run MedPick on everything. Of course we do. But at the same time, you have a few seconds to make an impression.
Mm-hmm.
You have a few seconds in this world, right? When we're sitting here looking at each other on screen, like, can I trust this person? Do I believe what they're saying? So unless you come across with real, genuine enthusiasm and real, I can't think of another word for it. It's authenticity. You have to be yourself, and you have to be really comfortable in your own shoes to convey that even more in the virtual world, right? When you're face to face with someone, you kind of you can read them better. You can get a feel for their body language. Are they really leaning in? Are they interested in this conversation? What are they doing with their hands? Right now, you can't even see what people are doing with their hands. Frankie, that's a good thing. Keep them there. So yes, you have to throw yourself into it wholeheartedly, but it is that authenticity that's conveyed. It's not a script. It must not be a script. You must hit your points, but it can't be a script. And it's a challenge of the virtual world, and it's also exhausting. The virtual world is way more tiring than when we used to sit in a room with a bunch of other people, like learning from each other and telling each other what we just come off a call. When was the last time you guys were actually on a sales floor where you sat with a bunch of other people? Do you remember that?
Oh,
Have you ever done that actually?
like
Or have you always been on
true
that?
sales floor. I mean, pre-COVID, we've had offices, but yeah, pre-COVID.
The last time I was actually going to an office doing the sales thing was when I was at Cisco 10, 11 years ago.
But was it fun?
Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
I
the
love
best.
being around the
It's the
people.
best.
It was great.
I mean, so I came to America with NetScreen. We had one pen. We had this like disgusting mosh pit in New York that way too many people were jammed into this tiny office. But every time we went there, was so much fun. And then you'd always
Yeah.
end up going out for a lunch or going out for a drink with people
Yeah.
afterwards. And you talk about work and you bounce ideas around the whole time. So you could learn really quickly. You could take advice from the best sellers on the team. They'd be there, live feedback. Like now we have to try and figure that out. We just created a Slack channel that's a kind of a little like more of a fun exchange of ideas where we can have some banter, where we can just take the mickey out of each other a little bit just to try and get some vibe. At Proofpoint, we probably had 100 people, no, 70 to 100 people in a room, where we had bells and we had gongs and stuff. And then Arrowhive, we definitely had 60 or 70 people in a room, and we had a bell and we had tequila shots and we had a bar. And, we had a ping pong table and a weight room and everything. That was so much fun. People
That was the best.
loved to go to work in that environment, and we had a blast. People met their life partners at work because there were so many people kind of just getting together, and it was such a different vibe to trying to bring that energy to selling. And a lot of selling is energy, right? You've got to be excited about it. You've got to have that buzz in the morning. You've got to. I have to work out in the morning to get myself going, to be excited enough to engage people on Zoom after Zoom. Sometimes
there's a big stigma around culture isn't a ping pong table or a keg tap, but I'm like, if I had to choose between two different companies and I had to go to the office, I want to go to the one with the keg tap and the ping pong table. It's more fun.
Well, actually, so I was at another company, and we had a push-up competition. So every PO that came in, all the execs had to do push-ups.
Nice.
And then the whole company when we won a deal of a certain size, everybody would drop down and do 10 push-ups. And we used to put it on LinkedIn. And then somebody got really bent out of shape and said, "Oh, it's a bro culture, blah, blah, whatever."
Oh, here we go.
And I was like, "No, it's not a bro culture. The women are killing us. They're and then the female members of the sales team were really pissed off that this dude was saying it was a bro culture. So they all piled in and said, no, it's actually a fun culture. So
Yes.
got him.
So then we did a yoga plank session to see who could do planks for the longest, and of course we could not. But
You won, right?
no, I did not. I did a lot of push-ups. Rich Campagna, though, is another good friend and advisor, and that guy's a machine. He could do 500 push-ups in a session. So we did a lot of push-ups. And we bombed it. I mean, we had our Indian founder who was probably in his 50s at the time, but even he would knock out 10 push-ups. And you've got to have fun. You do have to enjoy what you're doing, and you got to bring that energy, bring your A game.
Yeah.
So,
I think we could go another hour talking about the glory days of, being back in the office on a sales floor, hitting the gong, final day of the quarter, final day of the year,
right?
bringing in a purchase order, doing I mean, I've got flashbacks now. I'm right back.
Did you ever have a fax machine, Griffin?
We had a fax machine, but that only came at the holiday party. That really came into effect at the holiday party. But it just sat there in the corner collecting dust. We were all virtual back then.
I do remember fax POs coming in on the fax machine. That was maybe I'm dating myself slightly.
Exhilarating. Seeing the PO go through the fax.
You hear the machine going. You're like, here we go. Let's go.
Yeah,
we never had that. Just the attachment as a PDF on the email. I don't know. That was all we got was the email attachment. Oh my gosh. Well, Dean, I know we're mixing it up. We're back down. I think again, as we look to kind of wrap up, I'd love to know if you have any resources that you go to for inspiration or have made a difference for you in your career, whether that's a book that has stood out for you that has helped you kind of with your mindset around building a trust mentality, if it's a specific mentor that you want to give a shout out to. I know you already shouted out Mark. Anything else that you either recommend for listeners as a takeaway would be super appreciated.
Wow. I wish I prepared an answer for this one. I've
Well,
got
just
so
grab one
many.
off the top. Grab one off the shelf right there. You got one right here.
I I like history books actually, to be honest with you. So
There
I'm
you
kind of
go.
you want to read a good book. Anything by this guy Ben McIntyre is pretty cool. He's
Okay.
done a lot. Um, he's done a lot about espionage, special forces operators, stuff like that. I love,
I love it.
amazing characters. It's just so interesting to see what was it that sparked that one person, right? What I love in above all else in my career are the people that I've worked with who may have come in as SDRs or really raw recruits, seeing them go on to become VPs and CROs and be super successful in their career. So that's what I get inspired by, is seeing people get career progression, become successful, make a lot of money, have life-changing moments for their families. Particularly, the first. I've had so many. We recruited a lot of people out of San Jose State at a company, and
Go
there were a
Spartans.
bunch of first generation people that went to college in America, and came in as SDRs, made it up through the ranks, now VPs or CROs in their own right. It's just so refreshing to see people that really want to lean in and be successful, prepared to do the hard yards. It's like sport. If you want to be good at anything, you have to train, and you have to train hard. And you find inspiration from a whole raft of different areas. I find a lot of sporting inspiration. I find a lot of stuff from history books. Of course, I read business books, a lot of business mentors and thinking and business thinkers. But probably the best inspiration is just from my network, reaching
Yeah.
out to people that are just cool people, prepared to jump on the phone with you, give you a little bit of guidance, and just just re-energize you and keep you fired up again. There's just so much potential out there to be successful. We're in an amazing space, and the effort you put in is so directly correlated to the output you get in terms of career advancement and earning. We're in a great spot, and especially in tech right now.
Yeah.
There's so much evolution with AI coming in, AI as a marketplace, AI is changing everything and the opportunity we have in front of us. So I am very optimistic about it.
I love it. Yeah, if you're listening, grab the phone, call somebody after this episode because,
Exactly.
like you said, it's when we're sitting behind the desk all day for 8 hours plus a day, it can get pretty monotonous. But pick up the phone, have a real conversation, get
Actually,
inspired, get
what
excited.
so we've started, because I realized when I joined HackerOne that we were still like living in that COVID bubble. The first thing I did was just get-togethers at NetScreen. We had these things called NetScreen user groups, NUGs, and then at Proofpoint we had Proofpoint user groups, and AeroHive AUGs didn't sound good, so we called them Hugs, Hive user groups. And it was just getting customers together, getting some partners together, and getting some prospects together. Nothing terribly formal. Um, and then at Proofpoint, there's a guy called Kay Broashen who ran New York for us, and he started one up in New York that became just a meetup. And it was in a dive bar initially, like 10 people showed up. Then it got to like ultimately 50 people. But we started doing similar things with HackerOne, and we've done them now around the world. We've done probably, I don't know, 7 or 8 this year. And we get 50 to 100 people come. We get some customers, we get some researchers, we get some partners and some prospects. And we'll give a little directional speak about what we're doing, what we're seeing in the market. Then we'll get some other thought leaders to talk a little bit. But then the really interesting thing is at the end, where everyone just sits and has a drink and we just network. And
Yeah.
our junior reps come to those and they meet a bunch of people, and it really establishes their network quickly. So
Yeah.
if there's one takeaway, I would recommend that anybody that's listening, who can organize them, they're not expensive, they're easy to put on. Just that combination of existing customers meeting some prospects with your team, you get that trust network building really, really quickly. So that would be my holiday
Yeah.
gift.
And
I
raise
love
your
it.
hand and say, I want to go, right? If you're a rep and, your company's putting them on. I mean, I'm lucky enough to be
Suggest
at a
they do
company
it
that puts
even,
them on.
right?
Just
You
raise
know,
your hand and say,
maybe
hey,
Yeah,
I'd
if
like
they're
to
not
go.
doing it, they're not doing it. Make it a thing. Own
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
and we do like very small versions locally too that the reps own, and they're starting their own little networks that way too. So many ways to get it done, but you've just got to put in
Absolutely.
the effort to make it happen.
So, Dean, as we wrap, we like to wrap the podcast with the same question each time. We'd love your definition of an elite seller. How do you define an elite seller?
An elite seller is someone in my mind that does, yeah, it's a combination of the research that we talked about. So does the work, comes well prepared for every scenario, and is a great orchestrator, someone that coordinates all the resources, not someone that goes alone, not a lone wolf operator. Those are definitely not my elite sellers. It's a great collaborator, someone that can bring in the right technical people, the right product people, the right executive presence. That's an elite seller, someone who knows how to orchestrate the perfect sell. You don't have much time to get these things done. If you've got someone who's an elite seller, they're doing all the homework. They've briefed everybody fully on what their role is, what the expectations are. They've already foreseen the outcome. They know the challenges that are going to happen. That's an elite seller, someone that can really be that perceptive and get ahead of the game, do the preparation.
Mic
Love
drop.
it. Collaborator, use that trust network, get people in the room, get in the room, make the phone call, do it all. I'm going to listen to this one a bunch.
Couple
Fired up right
push-ups,
now.
couple push-ups
Be
in the office.
be yourself, be authentic,
Yes.
There you go.
Yes.
and yeah,
Yes.
feed that authenticity, right? Do not be contrived. Make sure your LinkedIn profile does not have Ryan in his wedding suit. Uh, no, Ryan, sorry, Griffin.
Come on.
Griffin in his wedding suit.
Oh
I don't
yeah,
know why I was thinking of another Ryan then, but anyway, yeah, do
he sounds
be
cool.
yourself as well. Be yourself and make that content as well available, right? They don't know,
Yeah,
the world has got to know what the real Frankie and Griffin really is too, outside the work veneer. So be yourself.
I'm glad you said that. It's important. Show up, people know who you are, and build that trust ahead of time. So, Dean, thank you so much for joining us. Safe travels this weekend and week. I know you've got some stuff coming up. So, thank you again for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, I'm heading to London, so looking forward to being back in the old city as well. Have a great holiday period and happy selling. All the best.
All right, that's a wrap, Dean. Thank you for joining us. So many great insights and action items that we can take. So if you're listening, when you walk away from this podcast, think about who's already in your network that you can pick up the phone, give them a call, and just chat through what's going on, how you can help each other. And then also think about playing the long game, right? We're so quick to try and get the next deal, the next sale, that we often think about sales, like Dean said, is a relationship game at the end of the day. So how can you go build those relationships? Like Griff mentioned, how can you build champions ahead of time, whether it's through events or through those user groups like Dean mentioned? Be creative, think outside the box, and start to put yourself out there, get in person with people, shake hands, meet people in person. So many great takeaways from this episode. Dean, thanks again for joining. And again, if you are liking this podcast, please subscribe, give us a review, comment. It would mean the world to us. Thanks again for listening.